Welcome to the 11th episode of the Perfectly Imperfect Spiritual Podcast. I met my today's guest in October through Pat Longo. I wanted to give myself a reading for my mom's first death anniversary. Yes, I am a medium too, and I do speak with my loved ones regularly, but it is nice for someone else to read for you too. I had a conversation with Pat, and she recommended me 7 different mediums. I was drawn to 2 names. The first medium has never got back to me, and then I contacted Nick Lodato, with whom I had a beautiful, very accurate reading with lots of healing messages. Nick is a nurse practitioner by day and has been a working psychic medium for about 8 years now. He was trained by Pat Longo and specializes in helping people with their anxiety and to understand energy. He does private sessions, events, and galleries. Welcome, Nick. Thank you for coming to the podcast.
Of course. Thanks for having me. I'm honored to have been your medium by default. I guess, the universe has funny ways of working things out. I also love that I'm on the 11th episode, by the way. That is perfectly planned. I like that a lot.
Thank you. Well, Spirit would like to start by acknowledging your hard work and dedication to your work as a nurse practitioner. So with that being said, could you tell me what made you choose to become a nurse practitioner? And has there been someone who perhaps inspired you to go via that route?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think as far as I kind of refer to it as my day job, right? I was heavily influenced by my mother. She is someone who is not only very spiritual, as you can see, that's her little decorations back there. She's a spiritual person in nature, but also just natural healer. She's a nurse herself. So, I always wanted to work in healthcare. I always knew I wanted to be working with people one on one. So it was just, I kind of consider myself lucky. I knew what I wanted to do at a young age. So I went right into nursing. And I worked in the ICU for about 6.5 years. Around a lot of trauma, around a lot of death. But I learned so much from it. And there's so many lessons, not only spiritual lessons, but also healthcare lessons that I took from it. And that's what I loved about my career choice personally for me and my personality and diving into the spiritual world, which I'm sure we'll talk about. There's a lot of parallels there. So I felt like for me, it was just very natural. And my nurse practitioner, is basically a master's degree in nursing, which advances my, kind of degree and scope of practice. So I always like to be kind of a leader. I like to be somebody that people look up to. So the nurse practitioner thing was really just the next step in that, taking care of my own patients and being able to see my own patients. It's an awesome opportunity. So yeah, it really, to answer the question, I guess it's the healing aspects of it that drew me, but then also, the influence of my own mother. So that was really it.
Okay, thank you. So we are living in a society that still considers talking about death a taboo. So many people swipe the subject of death under the carpet. They say, do not talk about death. At least that's my experience. I think it is important to talk about death openly, to normalize it, and to not pretend that this is not going to happen to us. So what have you learned about death, about crossing over throughout the years of working as a nurse practitioner and as a psychic medium?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love that question. I think it's always so interesting to me um, how spirit talks about death or experiences death, and then how people who are still human talk about death. I think spirit is usually so happy, when I communicate and I connect. The other side, I mean, I've gotten glimpses of it, and I could only speak from what I've been shown, but it's like this beautiful bliss, right? So I think when I experience that from the spirits point of view, it's always such an interesting contrast because I'm given this beautiful vision, and then I have somebody in front of me, maybe if I'm reading somebody who's emotional, upset, and they're grieving the loss, they're grieving, so I always say I try and just bridge that gap the best I can and kind of let them know how death is really, the way I see it is death is just the next step, right? It's just a process. It's just more or less I it sounds funny enough, but the way I sometimes describe it to clients is, if you think of we're living in one dimension, right? And all death is just a transfer of dimension. So it's like the equivalent I put it in like superhuman terms. It's like going from Walmart to Target across the street. Like right now, we're living in the Walmart. We're in like 3D. We understand the physical. We understand emotions, sure, but then like crossing over into like a 5D different store, like going over across the street into Target, you may not be able to access them. You can't see them, but they're there. They're just in another location. They're in a different dimension. So I try and bridge that gap and try and lessen people's fear of death. Because I think in human terms, it's so scary. It's so finite and it's so like final. And like there's a period after death. Like for a lot of people, they say, oh, this person died and that's it, they're gone. Where I like to kind of look at it like, death really is, as cliche as it sounds, it could be a soul's just very beginning. It's the beginning of the afterlife, right? Of the next life. So um it's such a in-depth, complicated concept,
Mhm.
I guess context to talk about, but it's just so interesting to me, and I do like talking about it, to be honest, because it is such a, I see it everywhere, um, and it's something that people carry around. I'm sure you have seen that too. Like people carry around the fear of it.
Yes, so I helped to transition. I helped my mom to transition, and she was very much scared
Mm,
of dying. And this was the most heartbreaking, but also the most beautiful moment that both of us shared, because I had
right,
not seen my mom for 4 years, and I actually telepathically communicated with her towards the end of her leaving. And we did lots of forgiveness. I channeled lots of goodbye letters for various family members, but
right.
also I wanted to give her forgiveness, and I also wanted to do it for me so that she could cross over. And also, I assured her that her loved ones would be greeting her. And that really helped. And she was very, very much holding on to living, because she was very much concerned where children and I would be living at that moment.
Mm.
And the minute I told her, don't worry, I've got it, then she was able to cross over. So I think, yeah,
I
that's my.
love that. No, and you bring up a really interesting topic too about forgiveness, and I truly believe, obviously things happen where lives are taken very quickly and suddenly, but I do believe in some aspects that the soul can kind of control when they let go of the body, when they choose to exit. So I think just like you talk about forgiveness, I think that's a huge thing that I see not only in practice but in like the psychic medium world. Um, there is such a thing as like holding on, like you said, holding on to life, and I think forgiveness really helps transition or make for a smoother transition. I think it also lessens the karma and like the karmic ties that you may have to somebody. So I find that really, I love to talk about that with my clients. And even when, and what amazes me too is a lot of times, like I've encountered plenty of clients who, I mean, you have such an amazing story because you had the opportunity to kind of connect with your mom and forgive
Mhm.
her in the 3D, where some people don't have that chance and they actually are closer with their loved one, whether it be a father or mother, on the other side. And it
Mhm.
feels like they almost rekindled a relationship when that person crossed over. Um, so yeah, I mean, the forgiveness is, I think, a part of everybody's life lesson,
Mhm.
and kind of where we're headed. So it's so interesting to me, that you share that. I think it's such a good point.
So could you tell a little bit about, well, there are two questions here. How can we get ready for our loved ones crossing over and for our own crossing over if we are gifted that time? And also how to cope with the traumatic and unexpected deaths of our loved ones when we had no time to prepare ourselves for that.
Yeah, those are good questions. Heavy, heavy questions. I think when it comes down to preparing, I think I'm going to touch on what I just spoke on, which is, forgiveness. I think if you have, like you said, I like how you put it, the blessing of kind of knowing that you have X amount of time. I think it's, I think some people would say, oh, you live life to the fullest and whatever. I mean, you have to do what makes you happy, but I think it's a lot of forgiveness, a lot of kind of crossing the T's, dotting the I's. In life, we do a lot of dancing around the bush in life. At least that's what I find with my clients and their experience in life. They're always worried about other people and what's going on with them, and but they're doing a lot of worrying. They're not really doing a lot of expression and talking and communicating. So that's why I always kind of encourage. And it's funny, I mean, it's not only me, it's really through spirit. Like spirit is always encouraging people to communicate, to connect, to bring families together. I mean, I'm sure yourself too, doing readings, like you find people who are so torn apart by someone's passing or so torn apart by silly, like mundane human things. And Spirit's message is always to communicate. So I think the simple answer to that question is to communicate your love, communicate your problems, whatever it is, just hash it out, have forgiveness, spend those moments and memories. My favorite thing that Spirit does in readings is when I'm like communicating is they love to bring up memories that they shared, with the person I'm reading.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be something, it sounds, sometimes I feel funny saying it because it sounds
Mm-hmm.
so random and like kind of like minuscule. But what I realize is I kind of have learned through Spirit's eyes that that's life. Like life is the mundane. Life is those little moments. Life is like the dance that we shared with somebody at a wedding, or like the funny lunch that we made each other some random Tuesday afternoon. Like that's life. Like life is those little moments that Spirit remembers and takes with them to the other side. So I think it's just being present, being the present moment, creating those memories, remembering to kind of like put your phone down, which everybody's so guilty with, but like put your phone down, being the present moment. I've yet to have Spirit come to me and say like, "Oh, I miss like Instagram." Do you know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's like usually it's the small moments of like connectedness and togetherness. So I think I don't know if that answers the question exactly, but that's kind of like how I would best suggest somebody to prepare or to just, be ready. I mean, it's tough when it's unexpected. I know you asked that too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think the unexpected is probably the most challenging. Um, but I think a lot of that too, a lot of it takes time, right? So it's give yourself time to grieve and process. And then I think, being able to connect in your own way with that person. And kind of like I said, just from what I've seen on the other side, to kind of understand kind of like the bliss, the bliss, I mean, and the peace that's on the other side is so powerful. And to kind of maybe stand strong in your faith and like knowing that. And it's so interesting. I don't mean to say in a religious way, but I think it's always good to believe in a higher power of some sort, whether that's God, Jesus, Buddha, whoever is like, or even just a higher power. It's always, I think, good to create some type of connection to something to kind of believe that there is more. Everybody has different life kind of journeys and passages and whatnot, but I think that that's what I've found. People who do the best when there's like an emergent situation that causes a traumatic passing, it's people who kind of have strong faith and seek to develop a relationship with the spirit that crossed over, even though they're on the other side. Spirit is always willing and able to communicate with us through very different ways. You don't have to be a medium to like talk to spirit. It could come in signs, messages, dreams. There's so many things. So that's like what I would say. I would say to try and continue that relationship with that person and kind of stand strong in your faith, whatever that is, for the individual.
Mm-hmm. That's very important. And so many clients of mine ask me, like, could you tell him? Could you tell him?
Yeah, yeah,
And then we both know that spirit can hear them, so they can communicate with them themselves. And I think that really helps with the. Lots of people feel very guilty. Sometimes they are not able to be physically with their loved ones during that crossing
yeah,
over. But actually, our loved ones frequently like hear our thoughts and intentions, and we can carry on communicating with them. So I think that's an important aspect of the mediumship work, but also what we can teach our clients so that they could actually continue or sometimes even start that relationship with
yeah.
their loved ones.
And that's such an amazing point. I think it's so funny that just happened to me. I had a client earlier today, and he was saying, "Oh, can you tell
Mm-hmm.
can you can you tell them this?" And I say the same thing to every client. I say, "Look, this is like a three-way call.
Mm-hmm.
They can hear you. Like just talk out loud. Like they hear your
Yeah.
thoughts. Like they are constantly present. And I don't really know what goes on over there. I only know what I'm shown, but." From what I know, they could, like I said, read your energy. They could read your thoughts. They are ever present with you. So yeah, and that's my favorite when, like I was saying before, when somebody develops a stronger relationship in the spirit world with somebody rather than here in the 3D plane. It's really powerful.
Mm-hmm. So how can we grieve? What's the purpose of grief? Have you ever received any messages from the spirit world
Hmm.
uh, about
That's
that?
it, like in the sense of, well, I mean, I
For
think
us
like,
human beings?
yeah, no, as human beings, it's such a good question because it's so human. It's like so, and I hate to like I would be like a false actor if I was just sitting here saying, oh, you should never be sad because they go to a better place. I mean, grief is so human life, and the earth is so insanely dense this is such like a dense experience. The emotion is so strong. So the word grief even just brings up dense emotions in people, let alone feeling it. It's, you're missing that person in the 3D. Like I said, like you're trapped in the Walmart and they went to the Target. Like you can't leave the store, you can't go and see them. But it's just like, again, some comfort in knowing that they live on in just a different realm. But I think, the purpose is really just missing them in the 3D. You're missing their physical touch, you're missing their scent, you're missing seeing them. Like, I mean, it's so palpable. And I think too, what's so interesting, what's coming to me too, is a lot of families, I kind of believe in like soul tribes, right? So families traveling together, experiencing multiple reincarnations together. I truly believe that when you have an exit of a soul, kind of go back to the other side, and your soul tribe is kind of interrupted. So things kind of morph and change, like that dynamic can morph and change, and you're missing that person. I mean, it's so human. It's so normal. And I think too, to not like fault yourself or don't be hard on yourself for grieving somebody. I think there's no timeline for grief. It's so amazing when I read a client, and sometimes like I had a client the other day whose mother came through, and she had passed away like 25 years ago, but it literally felt like in this client's energy that it happened just yesterday. And that's what she said. She said, she thinks about it every day like it happened yesterday. And that may be some people's reality, but I think it's just a matter of dealing with it in a healthy way. I mean, in a way that's productive. Spirit's always amazing. I'm sure they deliver you awesome messages too when it comes to what they want us to do with our grief.
Mm-hmm.
But Spirit loves when you kind of just, instead of, I guess, grieving in the sense of like pausing your life and stopping living, they like when you just continue to live and like live in their honor, do all, like I talked about earlier, like do those little memories that make everybody happy, getting the family together, those little things. So they want you to live your life to the fullest, which I think is a beautiful thing. So yeah, grief
Mm-hmm.
is a tough topic, but that's it's so human, but there's also such spiritual aspects to it, but it's tough.
Mm-hmm. I've just had the same thought about spirit encouraging us to actually find purpose and
Mhm.
find a new meaning, no matter what type of death our loved ones went through. And
Yeah,
frequently we hold on to the grief and we kind of put our lives on pause. And spirit really wants us to embrace our lives, live in the present. Yeah.
yeah.
So
No, 110%. I couldn't agree more. That's exactly the message that I try and convey to clients. And look, not everyone's ready. I understand, sometimes things are fresh and there's questions and it's an up and down kind of roller coaster of grief. But I think as long as you're kind of moving in the right direction, and Spirit doesn't want you to forget them, but they want you to live in their honor. That's how I best kind of, display it to people and present it to people. You're honoring them by, continuing your life or continuing the things that you were going to do. It's amazing things. So and like I said too, getting back to the relationships, like you can maintain the relationship with them, you can talk with them, talk out loud,
mhm.
write them letters, like they can see all that and they could read that, and it's something that is it's truly powerful.
Yes, yeah. Uh, because I'm still grieving, I don't know whether you stop grieving loss of your loved ones, but yeah,
Right.
losing my mom, the physical aspect of it has really touched me.
Yeah,
So I think I would say to everyone as well that like grief can be like so messy, and I always describe it as something that comes in waves and in the least expected moments. So I think it's so important to embrace it and to be very kind towards yourself with whatever comes up, and to not deny or like ignore the feelings, but to allow those emotions to pass through us.
yeah. No, I couldn't have put it better. I think um it's it's something that is, I mean, you, especially like losing your mother, you can speak to it best, but I think there's a lot of acceptance there and acknowledgement and accepting what you're feeling, and then also kind of, like I said, healthily trying to turn that energy into something positive.
Mhm.
So it's very challenging, and like you said, you probably never lose the grief, but it's something that you can hopefully live in, and I should use the word manage. Hopefully you can manage.
Mhm. Okay. What do you think have been the biggest life lessons that you had to go through while working as a nurse practitioner? And what have you learned about yourself that perhaps you were not aware of?
Yeah. Wow. Um, good question. I think when it comes to like the whole, like I said, nursing and spiritual aspect of stuff, um, I was fortunate enough to work in a setting, like I said, like in the ICU, and being able to experience death and watching people die, working on people, whether it be through compressions or whatever before they died, and seeing the family after. I feel like I took so many lessons away from that. To be honest, I think it's really directly affected my life in a positive way. I mean, sure, there were definitely people that I worked with who maybe became depressed and they became, angry or jaded, working in that type of setting. But I tried to take from it, that life is like a blip, like, and anything can happen at any moment that can totally change our life. So I think working in the nurse practitioner area, that's really what I took from it, and just being able to kind of like live in the present moment the best you can and live life to the fullest. A lot of people don't know what that even means. Like, people
Hmm.
just say, "Oh, live life to the fullest," as like a cliche term.
Hmm.
But I think like living life to the fullest, what that means for me anyway, is like communicate in an open, honest fashion, kind of being vulnerable with your emotions and feelings. And look, I mean, this has been a constant work in progress for myself in my personal life. Obviously, nobody's perfect. We're all human. But I think living life to the fullest in that way, that's what it kind of means for me. So that's what I've taken from my personal job, I would say. And really just spending time with, again, trying to create those small moments with my family. I'm very, very close with my family. I'm super lucky that my parents are still here and my brother. But I think it's like those are the people that mean the most to me, and I want to create those happy little moments with them, because that's what they're going to take with them. That's what I'm going to take with me, and that's living life to the fullest. So because you never know what's around the next corner. So I don't mean to sound so like kind of grim,
Hmm.
but that's the view that I kind of got from working in the ICU and watching people die. Um, is this feeling of, oh wow, like this is just, it really gives you that vision, the contrast of like, this is a lifeless body. A lot of people have never worked with a lifeless body. It's like, this is just a shell. Like, who are we really? Are we, we're this soul. There's so much more to us, and it just gives you a kind of a kick in the ass, really, and just kind of wakes you up. And that's how what I've kind of taken from it. And of course, like communicating with spirit in the psychic medium sense has been so beautiful and such like an insane. It's like insanely humbling. I'm sure you feel the same way. So insanely humbling and and kind of like I feel gifted in a way, not that I'm gifted, but gifted by spirit to be able to communicate and deliver these messages and really just experience the lessons that they teach me. I had a client earlier, who I had said to her, I said, I always, whenever I read you, it's somebody who I frequently read, and whoever I read you, I learn from your guides. Like, the
Hmm.
way that they explain things to me is so interesting and so give me this different viewpoint that I never would have looked at things. So I try and take all of that information. I mean, it's so much, but I try and apply it to my own life, and I try and kind of share it here and share it with other clients, just to kind of spread the word and kind of change people's perception and perspective on things. So
Hmm. I truly believe like once we've stepped on that mediumship path, there's nothing that's being hidden. Like it's a fast track, like a shadow work. So
mm,
in every reading, not
yeah,
only we are able to take something for ourselves and to learn, but also, well, spirit also uses our point of reference and our experiences, so then we can help our clients as well. So I think it works both
yeah.
ways.
Oh,
Uh,
100%, 100. And it's like I said, it's always I try and learn from my clients, to be honest, no matter how young they are or old they are and what their experiences are. Everybody's like a fingerprint, vastly different. And it's a blessing to be able to connect with so many people and learn from them. Because I kind of feel as if I can take on their experiences, and I try and just obviously take on the positive and remember, what they've gone through, what they've learned, and what spirit told me. So it's really it's amazing, really.
so what has helped you the most to develop as a psychic medium? What did you have to overcome to step fully into your power?
Yeah, I think starting at such a young age, I feel like I had to overcome a lot of personal things with that, where I felt very different. I didn't really know how to control it. I was so blessed to meet Pat Longo, and her book is awesome for those who struggle with
Hmm.
anxiety. It's this kind of the huge difference maker she was in my life. To kind of take my anxiety, or what I like to call kind of like I was. so sensitive to the energy, obviously, that I just couldn't even really function in everyday life. So I think that all obviously affected my personal life and my social life and having friends and whatnot. So I think just getting it under control was my first step, learning the protect, ground, and shield method and learning how to control the energy around me and what it all meant, how to interpret it. I often have been describing like energy or reading people. It's like speaking a different language. You're just able to read the energy. It's the equivalent of being able to speak Spanish or French or something. Like you could just speak a different language. So I think that was, what my first step had to be, was just controlling that and acknowledging that, hey, something is going on that you kind of have to address. I often say, like, I either had to address this head on or kind of suffer it with it the rest of my life. So I kind of chose to come out from the shadows, if you will, and kind of deal with it. And I think as far as development in like the psychic medium world, I honestly, truthfully, I never thought that I would be reading people. It wasn't like a goal of mine. I didn't think like, I didn't set out to say
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I want to, talk to
Mm-hmm.
people's dead relatives. But I think because there's so much judgment that comes with that. And
Mm-hmm.
even still to this day, I, kind of go back and forth with how much I want to share and how open I could be with certain people, because there's unfortunately judgment, which I understand. But I think as far as my own personal development, a lot of it is just doing, which sometimes people don't want to hear, like developing mediums. You just have to do it. Like you just have to kind of be thrown in a situation where you are reading somebody, because then you're going to start to learn your own flow. You're going to start to learn how you work. I can't watch Teresa Capito, as amazing as she is. I can't watch her. And there's bits and pieces that I can look at her and I can say, oh, I think I know what she's doing.
Mm-hmm.
I can speak from that. I can learn from that. But I'm gonna eventually have to develop my own flow. I have to develop what works for me, how I get into somebody's energy, what I'm seeing,
Mm-hmm.
what I'm sensing. Because you mentioned something earlier too. Spirit uses your own personal references to help
Mm-hmm.
you with somebody. So I only know what my experiences are. So I think developing at a young age was maybe a little bit more challenging, just because again I felt so different from my peers and I didn't really tell people about it. But really, I just was surrounded by such amazing people in Pat's classes. And at the time, Pat was having weekly classes of probably about 12 to 15 people. And being around, and this is what I encourage somebody who's kind of, or anybody who's kind of budding spiritually and they're interested in doing stuff like this, to surround yourself in spiritually minded people, people who are more powerful than you, and kind of more advanced than you, because it kind of brings you forward. I was surrounded by such amazing, talented mediums and psychics, and it really made me who I am and kind of developed me. Um, a lot of just practices was, like I said, just kind of doing it. Pat really just pushed me to read people and working in Pat's fair and whatnot. But also like automatic writing really helped me too. Channeling spirit through writing for whatever reason was just really helpful for me to be able to, write messages down and kind of understand how I interpret it, how I hear it, how I sense it, was very helpful for me. I still will do that, even if I communicate with a certain spirit, I'll sometimes I write everything out. It's just easier for me. So I think doing that, meditation, of course, some people really don't like meditation. I think it's something that everybody hates to do, but then when you do it, you feel so much better. And really, what I mean by meditation is kind of building that communication with your guides and kind of saying, like, that spiritual library that Pat talks about, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
talking about, oh, like, what are you going to show me when somebody has this happen to them? So it's a lot of work, really, and responsibility to read people. I take it seriously, because especially if you're accepting money and this is an exchange of energy. But I think putting in that work is definitely, and just having more volume, reading more people, it gets yourself better. You start to learn yourself. And like I say, really, I feel like I develop each reading I do. Each person I connect with, each reading I do feels like better and better. So it's really interesting. So I feel like I'm nowhere near where I want to be, and I would never sit here and profess that I'm the best either. I think we're
Mm-hmm.
all constantly growing and developing. So
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I'm a perfectionist by nature and I had to drop that, but I do remember when I heard Spirit telling me you're a psychic medium, and then I told them straight away, okay, like bring me the right teachers because I don't want to be a scammer. I need to know how to do
right,
it. I have no idea what to do it.
right,
Uh,
exactly,
yeah, but I
and that
definitely agree. Sorry to interrupt you,
no, no,
with what you said about Spirit using our own point of reference. And I think it's so important for every medium to read the way it comes naturally to us. I didn't want to observe or attend many demonstrations when I first started. So many friends kept telling me like, come and do it. And like, because you can pick up, you can learn something. And like, I don't really want to do it because I
Right.
really want to trust, and I really want spirit to choose the way they want to deliver the message. So I think, yeah, at least that's the way it.
I couldn't agree more. And I think I've had the same experience. I've had so many, like I'm blessed to have experiences where I've worked with, like, again, like celebrity famous mediums like Kim Russo or Marianne DeMarco, who are awesome. I mean, amazing. Marianne, somebody I really look up to because I know her personally, and I did an event with her on Long Island, and my other friend Teresa was there, and it's like I love being around other great mediums because you can learn from them, but I feel like you have to kind of be at a certain level to kind of absorb what they're doing, and just because you have to know that you're going to do things your own way. So you have to be able to kind of observe them and say, oh, that's interesting. They go like this, they do this. But I'm going to do it this way. Because I think when you get in that, the environment where you're comparing yourself, it gets kind of weird.
Mhm.
You don't want to be in a comparison game, right? Comparison is like the thief of joy. So I think just being in a position where you are your own power, and especially, this is coming to me too, like, especially like you being a female and I'm a male, we are going to have vastly different interpretations of energy, and I may deliver a message totally different, and you may deliver a message totally different. And I also encourage my clients, I'm sure you do the same, I kind of encourage them to explore other people. And like, I don't get offended if somebody tells me, oh yeah, I went to somebody else. I think it's good, as long as you're not going for readings every month. I think people
Mhm.
can get a little crazy. But if it's like once every 6 months, if you want to try somebody different, I think that's fair. I think if anything, I think it's a good experiment to do, because then you can kind of see, because I bet you that they're going to deliver the same messages. It's just in a different way. Because I'm going to interpret something different than how you would interpret it. It may be the same baseline message, but it's going to be a little bit different. Um, so I think you just have to trust as a reader, and for anybody who's trying to, build up a client base, I guess just trust whoever's coming to you, that they need you for whatever reason, and just kind of deliver, or work the best you can, at delivering those messages.
So, how do the loved ones on the other side communicate with you? And what clairs do they use? And does it differ from spirit to spirit?
Yeah. So I think it's so interesting. The thought, when I first was learning with Pat, I never really understood what even clairs meant, to be honest. Like, I
Hmm.
just knew like clairvoyance, and that's how I
Hmm.
was like, okay, I know what clairvoyancy is. But now I hear like people talk about, oh, I'm clairaudient, clairvisual. I don't know. There's all these different clairs.
Hmm.
So I never really thought of it that way. I do think it is definitely spirit by spirit basis. Clairvoyance to me is something, I'm like somebody who's very, like, I'm, like I said, sensitive to energy, right? So everything that I experience, there's a lot of clairvoyance in it, where I can just kind of feel an energy, and I know like, oh, this is going to happen for this person, or this is coming for this person. Like, I can just see it, I know it, I feel it. It's like I'm able to identify the energy. So I think that's more of like my empath side, where I'm able to see something and feel it. When I say see, I see it all with my mind's eye.
Hmm.
So I get a lot of, what I describe to people is, it's kind of like a reel of pictures that are
Hmm.
going through my head, and I'm kind of picking out, what I'm seeing and what I'm getting, and spirit will show themselves to me also in my mind's eye. I don't want to see anybody visually. I think that would be a little freaky, but it's all up in my mind's eye. So I think, I guess, if that would be like a visual component, um, and also like the audience too. I don't hear it like a booming outside voice. It's more of a communication, a dialogue that happens inside my head, inside my mind's eye. I don't know if this happens to you during readings, but it's very interesting. Sometimes I will kind of feel as if I can't see, and I think it's because I'm so focused on up here that, like, visually my vision is like not operating. It's very strange, but it's this feeling where I almost feel like I'm almost like looking here, and I'm not using my actual body eyes. So you kind of get like in this trance mode
Hmm.
where you're just like focused on what's happening up here. So it's like, for me, it's like a quick movie. I tend to read very fast too. So I try, it's like a one long loop. So I'm just trying to kind of pick out what I see and what's going on. And then from there, it depends on the spirit. Some spirits are very talkative. Usually, if they were talkative in life, they're talkative in the
Mm-hmm.
afterlife. Some spirits are a little bit more quiet. I have to kind of pull from them. Some spirits like to just communicate with feelings. Sometimes they'll just look at me, and I say, "Oh, well, this is so and so's here, and they're just looking at me, and they're giving me this feeling. What does that mean?" So it may be things like that. I think what's helped me a lot is using all of the clairs, not just focusing, because I think people focus too much on like, oh, I just want to hear something, I just want to see something.
Mm-hmm.
It's really gonna be it's gonna be a combination of everything. Like you have to pay attention to how you feel when you're in somebody's energy too, because that sometimes I start my readings like that. I kind of start by reading somebody's aura and I say, oh, like I'm feeling this, I'm feeling this, and then the rest kind of just flows. So I would pay attention to all of that. Pay attention to how you feel. Pay attention to, like I said, what you're seeing, what you're sensing. You're kind of using everything. Um, it's so different for everybody, but that's kind of how I communicate with spirit, and how I kind of see things. When I'm in somebody else's energy.
And I think it's so important as well for anyone who's developing their mediumistic abilities to not really force anything, to not really force to use a particular clair, but to allow spirit world to develop us the way they want us. From my experience, like spirit's been bringing various clairs and then taking them away and then like giving layers. But what you've mentioned, it's so important, is just to trust that, well, it doesn't really matter how it's coming through, but like to be open to receive messages in no matter what form, because I think this is the only way when we're really tapped into the spirit realm. This is when we really like move the ego aside and we're really connecting, because if I'm going to use my logical mind, like what color am I using, I'm not going to really connect with the spirit world.
No, and it's funny you said the word ego. It was coming to me too. Like I feel like the biggest. I mean, I learned so many lessons from Pat, but I feel like some of the ones that have pushed me forward with reading people. One of the major ones, she said, like you have to set your ego aside. Like this is not. It's not about you at
Mhm.
all. That's why I think once I really adopted that and accepted that, it's your job becomes different. Like you're just the middleman, and like you said, you put it perfectly. I'm not trying to focus on, because I think it's very ego based, right? If I'm like, tell me this or tell me that, like it's
Mhm.
very egotistical. So I'm kind of just, hey, like I'm gonna use, I'm just a vessel, and deliver me the messages however you see fit. And you're just the messenger, and all my job is to just interpret the energy the best I can, and that's why I usually say to my clients, I say, look, like I'm gonna just translate this to you the best way that I can, and exactly how they're showing it to me or how they're saying it to me. That's what I'm going to do. And of course, I mean, you're not going to be perfect, right? I mean, there's even if you're, I usually compare it, like even if you're talking to somebody in life, person to person, there may be miscommunication. There may be like you may read somebody's body language wrong. Like that could also happen in spirit form too. But I think it's just in a matter of trying to get it as closely to accurate as possible. And sometimes I ask for like multiple validation from spirit. And sometimes I've said like, oh, so and so saying this, and they're telling me this. And then I said, oh no, wait, like they're actually saying this. Like, because spirit is also in their own, they're also having conscious thought too. So it's like that can change. And so it's just so interesting. I think as long as you just try and get it as accurate as possible, like you said, and not be so worried about how it comes in, just be open to like how it does kind of show itself. Yeah.
Mhm. And it's so important as well to not to try and control the spirit world.
Mhm.
This is what happens often as well when clients come and they have that one piece of evidence that they really want us to bring forward. And sometimes we don't, and like it doesn't matter how many pieces of evidence we bring, how many childhood memories. Like you have not mentioned that figurine of a giraffe. Uh, and in my experience, what spirits they keep telling me, well, maybe it's not the most polite thing, but they keep telling me we're not monkeys in the circus. We're not going to perform. You have to, as a client, develop that trust as well. I'm giving you all those childhood memories, all those things that no one would have known. So I think
Sure.
not only as mediums we have to develop trust, but for anyone who is a client, anyone who wants to develop, is just to trust that our loved ones will know how to communicate with us.
Yeah, that's a huge thing that Pat would always say too. That another, tidbit of information I took with me. She would say, like spirit is going to give you, give the client, I should say, what they need to hear, not necessarily what they want to hear. And that's like a huge, and sometimes I will say that to people too. I'll start my readings like that because, whatever. And I understand that somebody can be, a client can be hyper anxious and, fixate on one thing. And, who knows? Spirit may bring that up,
Hmm.
or they may not bring that up. And I think you just, like you said, you put it perfectly. You have to have faith, as the client, that whatever's meant to come forward is meant to come forward. And that's that, and I think, um, it also, the timelines are also interesting too. Like, who knows? Like, there may be stuff that somebody's not ready to hear, is what I like to say too. Or I've even had situations where I was in a group setting, reading the group, and spirits kind of telling me information about somebody, but then I kind of keep getting the message like, oh, they don't want this known, like don't say it out loud.
Hmm.
And that's, you're kind of, so it's very interesting to each situation, so wildly different. Um, but yeah, that's a really good point. But yeah, that's what I always say. I say, you're gonna hear what you need to hear, maybe not what you want to hear.
Hmm. Definitely. So how can anyone strengthen their connection with their loved ones on the other side and develop that trust that it is actually their loved ones who they are communicating with?
Yeah,
So like
and
those
that's
who are not mediums.
right. And so they know that they're not crazy, right? Like
Hmm.
that's, I love that. That's like when people, I have clients that say to me, like I think it's great when people ask for signs and messages. I think that's so powerful. Maybe not every day, you have to give your loved one a rest on the other side. But I think that's a really good way to kind of like signify and validate that they are there, they are listening to you, whatever that sign or message is. I've heard of people asking for wildly specific signs and messages, and they actually get them. So
Hmm.
you never know. Spirit, I find, once they get to the other side, it's almost like they function in a very comical way. I think the universe is kind of structured in like a comical way, if you think about it, where I think, like again, they're in peace, they're in bliss. So I think the way they view things is very different. And they're always like just knowing and trusting that they're always willing and able to help you. Spirit always will tell me, tell them to talk to me more. Tell them to
Hmm.
ask for this, like ask for that, and ask for guidance or whatever it is. So I think to just don't be afraid to ask. I know you may feel crazy if you're saying it out loud, you're saying it in your head. You could also say it in your head, but to just communicate with them and keep that relationship alive. Like just like how you would text anybody who was alive, how you would call them, tell them you love them or miss them. You can do the same thing with spirit, and just know and believe that they are hearing you, and they'll validate that through signs and messages. So, a lot of the times, I usually have to explain to people, sometimes people are like, oh, I'm not looking, I don't feel like I'm getting anything from this person. We were so close in life and now I feel like I don't feel them. And to those people, I usually say, you know, it's always like when we're looking for something, it's always like right under our nose, right? So I think that goes back into like forcing things. You can't force spirit to show you something, but I think what you can do is kind of just take a step back and know and have faith that something's going to show up when you least kind of expect it, when you're not looking for it. Sometimes spirit is just plotting. They're just waiting. They're like, oh, I want to wait for a big opportunity to show themselves. Um, and spirit is pretty amazing with that. I mean, the synchronicities are wild. Like stories that I've heard are insane. It makes me, even as a medium, believe in the afterlife even more. Even like someone who does this, I hear stories and I'm like, oh my god, like
Hmm.
it kind of validates my own craziness. But I think that's how, I guess what I would say is I would just keep that relationship alive as if they were here, as if they were physically here. I know it's different. You can't see them, you can't feel them, you can't hear their voice, but they're there. I mean, and spirit loves that. They love to be included in things. They love when you share stories about them. It's they're as physically there as they can get. You know.
Hmm. And you can speak with them in your mind or you can journal. I sometimes forget and speak out loud, and then especially when I'm driving car, and then my kids are asking, "Who are you speaking with?" And I'm like, "Okay." So
Yep.
sometimes I
Yep.
feel I should have headphones on. It's safer. But no, definitely. So how do you help people with their anxiety and to understand their energy? Because I know this is what you help people with.
Yeah, no, it's something that I've been blessed. I work with a woman named Jen Weigel, who is awesome and has a spiritual social club that's so cool. But she kind of has a nice community of spiritual people, and she also works alongside Pat as well. And Jen's kind of opened me up to this new world of, she's kind of pushed me in this direction of helping a lot of the times it's younger people, but it could also be any age, really. People with anxiety, a lot of the times, anxiety has become almost like a trendy thing nowadays. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, I was fortunate enough, like I said, my mom was very spiritual growing up, and I was never put on medication. I kind of had to face this a different way. So I'm trying to just offer kind of an alternative for people. Um, and medications are definitely necessary in some aspects, of course. But I think I just like to offer more of a holistic approach where it's like, hey, maybe your anxiety is not so much anxiety, like generalized anxiety disorder. This could be you're being sensitive to the energy around you. And I always explain it as like, we kind of are familiar with our own energy, right? We kind of have our own aura, our bubble around us. But people who are very sensitive and very open kind of have like, think of it like Swiss cheese. People have
Mm-hmm.
holes in their aura, right? Because they're so sensitive and the energy kind of blends, it kind of meshes, and your body has like a physical response to this external energy. So your body, you have that high heart rate, you're sweating, you feel faint, you feel like you want to throw up, all these things. Um, that anxiety brings. It's really like anxiety is like this word, but really what I like to call it is like you're kind of having like an energy reaction. Like you're having a reaction to someone's external energy. And I always say to people that I do help, like there's such a thing what I call like situational anxiety. If you're afraid to fly, you're going to feel anxious. If you have a big test coming up, of course you're going to feel anxious. That's like normal anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
That's situational anxiety. I'm talking anxiety that comes out of nowhere. It may be around a specific person, a specific place, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
You could really just be absorbing other people's stuff. So that's how I describe it because that's how my reality was growing up. And then once I learned how to control that and really put up that force field, then I was able to identify, okay, this is my energy, this is someone else's energy, and this is what it means, and so forth. So I love to work with people like that because I love to like, and I know Andrew was on the show too. He's somebody that I feel so grateful that I was able to help him and get to a point now where he's like reading people and he's able to like identify the energy that's around him. So I'm so
Mm-hmm.
like super proud of him. But he's just one example, and I think and it doesn't mean you have to be like reading people and talking to dead people. It's really just about controlling the energy around you to the point where you're able to function and feel okay and protect yourself. That's really what our intuition is for anyway. It's just for your own guidance and for your own self. Anything that comes after that is just a gift. It's just a kind of like a bonus. So yeah, I'm really passionate about that. I do love doing that. It's a cool thing. And like I always tell people, usually once you learn how to control your own energy, like you usually have like some type of spiritual awakening. It's really awesome.
Mm-hmm. It's such an important work that you're doing. I experienced horrible night terrors as a child, well, in
Mm,
kindergarten and then the whole primary school, and it was so much invalidated because my family
mm,
didn't believe in spirit. I could see spirit with my naked eye, and then I closed those
yeah.
abilities, but it was very scary. And now, knowing what I know and knowing what I've experienced, I'm able to help my children. My daughter now goes through her own night terrors. Then my son
Mm,
is the one who experiences the anxiety that you've just described. He picks up on the energy of others. He's
yeah.
not that open now to me educating him, but I keep talking openly about the surround, ground, and shield. And I think it does work because for the Mother's Day, my daughter gave me a drawing of a mum in a surround, ground, shield in a bubble. So I think preaching helps, but uh, definitely it's so important for so many people to understand that anxiety can come from picking up on the energy of others and of the spirit
Yeah.
world.
No, 100%. And like I said, I think I always try and explain like what I mean by that because I think then some people think like, oh, like well, you're saying any anxiety means you're a medium. That's not what I'm saying. Obviously, it's just it's something that is can be specific to somebody. And to be honest, I've seen so many people's, including my own, so many people's lives totally change by learning these methods and learning how to just it may not be. Again, medication is definitely um necessary for some people, but for some people you could really avoid it. You may not need it. You may be kind of being told that something's wrong with you, but it really is like another thing. We don't in the medicine world, we don't know everything, and in the spirit world, we don't know everything. So you might as well try different things to kind of see what's, what's
Mhm.
proper. But I mean, your kids are very lucky to have someone like you to kind of guide them in that way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to those who live their lives up to the expectations of others, ignoring their hearts and soul's desires?
Yeah, I think everybody as a human like experiences this at some point, like kind of living in it's I think it's part of like the human condition that we all have to kind of unprogram ourselves to think. It's a very empty existence. You'll constantly feel drained. You'll constantly feel like you are empty inside. Usually, I try and keep it very simple with my clients. I usually tell them like you have to do what makes you feel whole, because it's your soul speaking to you, right? Your soul speaks to you when you feel whole, when you feel full on like a soul level. Um, these are the things that you should be doing. These are the people that you should be around, and maybe people you're around where you just feel good around, and then vice versa. You have to kind of separate yourself from the people you don't feel good around, because again, those are probably the people who are more toxic, and you're kind of giving a lot of energy, and not really getting any back. So I would always pay attention to, how is the dynamic of the relationship? How much energy am I putting into this relationship? How much am I getting back from this relationship? Is it worth my time? Am I worried about this person's opinion? I mean, it's very exhausting. I'm like, again, we've all been in relationships like that. I'm not even talking romantic. I'm talking just friends wise.
Mhm.
It's exhausting. Even coworkers or whatever, it's exhausting to be in relationships where there's a strange dynamic and you kind of feel like it is you're living to impress them, or kind of get under their positive light, if you will. So I think it's just and kind of knowing too, like I say this too, this is very simple, but most things that people have problems with inside you really stems from them. It's like a lot of projection goes on in the human realm, and you may make them feel uncomfortable because you may remind them of somebody, or you may look like someone, or you walk a certain way. Like it could be something so simple, why they don't like you or why they give you trouble. So it's kind of like like that's a you problem, and it's so freeing. Like finally, I think it's again, it really hit me more as I got older, but it's so freeing, like not caring what people think, or at least caring less what people think, and just knowing like, hey, you know what? Like I think this is a them problem thing. I think, if I bother them, it's because of them. It's not because of me. I'm not going to change my trajectory. And, just knowing everybody's on their own path, spiritually, emotionally, physically. There's so many different like people around us. I guess we're all human, but it sometimes can feel like we're all like so different in so many different ways. So,
Any simple ways of how people can live a more intentional life, how they can discover their divine purpose?
yeah. Um, I think that's a big one where I think again, like I'm gonna bring up what I just said about feeling whole on like a spirit, soul level. That's something that, like, when I read somebody, when I read a client, I feel whole after. Like I feel like I did something good. I feel like I'm doing something that my soul should be doing. So I know to keep doing that thing. So I know it's very difficult for some people to find what their purpose is. And then also we have the human condition where you obviously have to make money to make a living. I mean, that's a legitimate
Mhm.
thing. I'm sure some people would love to just travel around and do nothing, but that also is not a purpose either. I
Mhm.
think serving others and just being in the being in society and participating in society is a really good experiment for the person to see what they like, what they don't like. So I would kind of encourage people. And usually, what I tell my clients, it's funny. I just read an entrepreneur this morning too, who I was kind of pushing to just do things, like just do it, like because you can sit back all you want and you could say, oh, I don't know if I'm going to like it. I don't know if this is for me. Is this really my intention? Is this my
Mhm.
purpose? But you won't really know until you just do it, and the universe will kind of guide you. Just have faith in the fact that if it works out, great. If it doesn't, you go on to the next thing, like, so I think we all try and live these perfect lives where we make no mistakes, but that's not reality. Like that's not the human condition. That's not how this works. We're here to kind of screw up, and we're here to trip and fall and get back up. So I kind of encourage people, just do it. Whatever it is, you want to open a business, just do it. Don't, of course I understand this financial implications and you want to make smart decisions. That's important too, but you just have to kind of try things. So I think it's almost like I believe in trial by like fire, I guess. Like just do it and see how you feel after. And if it's something you never know. you may take one job and it could lead to another job, and then before you know it, oh wow, this is the job I wanted. This is all I, ever dreamed of. Nothing is perfect, but I think as long as you're working in the service or the industry that you want to be in is a kind of a good piece of advice.
Definitely. And taking action. This is so important. That's why I called, well, Spirit called that podcast Perfectly Imperfect
I love the
Spiritual
name of
Podcast, because that's what I believe, like take those perfect, imperfect actions and then like tune in and feel whether that's something you want to do or not. And I think that's applicable to everything in life.
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree with you. And I really do. I love the name of the podcast. I kept reading it when it was coming up, and it's because that's like, I think people have this, they put pressure on themselves to like have this perfect life, and everything has to be picture perfect, and it's never, it's just never that way. So
Okay. I've got two last questions for you.
sure.
Uh, When you do readings, do you ever have bad days and when you don't really see loved ones or you can't really connect with them? Or perhaps you sometimes experience clients who are closed and not so open to the other side. What do you do then? What helps you and
Yeah,
what helps the client?
yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, as a reader, you're always experience somebody who is either tough on you, or a little bit closed off. But I usually, I mean, to be honest, I kind of dig deep with my guides. Like I'm like, okay, give me something, show me something. Like, I kind of go within, and I kind of pull something forward. Luckily, I've never had to like send somebody away. I think, but that's where practice comes in, where I kind of have, I feel like, different methods or different steps to get in someone's energy. And then once I'm in the energy, I'm in, and I can kind of go from there. But most of the time, the people who I've experienced and encountered, people book with me, right? Like I'm not advertising. You found me, you want a reading with me, then, this is how it'll go. It's like you asked for it type of thing. I
Mhm.
find that where I've had issues is where people either like gift a reading to somebody or
Oh, yeah.
force somebody. I know. I think we all feel the same about that because it's very challenging. It's tough because that person didn't really ask for it,
Mhm.
and spirit will show up. I mean, I'll do the reading and it'll be, this, I'll treat it the same way as any other client, but the person may not be receptive to it, or they may not be ready to receive it because they didn't themselves sign up for it. They don't really want it. They may be doing it for another family member. It creates a whole dynamic. So I think, um, the clients usually have the best intentions. And like I said, I just try and focus on delivering the energy as accurate as I can. I'm definitely not perfect. Nobody is. But I feel like, again, getting back to what I said earlier, you kind of just have to trust that this person is sitting in front of you for a reason, and just, do the best you can with the energy. I've definitely felt like I've had better readings than other readings, but then I've also read people where I felt like, oh, like I didn't do the best I could, or I didn't feel like I got everything that I needed to, and then they want a reading again. Like, so you never really know what somebody needs to hear. You just have to, and to be honest, as I've done it more and more, I kind of get a point where I don't care really. Like, and what I mean by that is I don't think of it. I don't, once I'm done with the reading, I'm done. I'm back to my life, because I think if I thought in a way of constantly like picking apart or judging myself, it would be very toxic. So I kind of do my best and then I step away from it.
So how do you see your mediumship career progressing? Where do you see yourself in 5, 10, and 15 years?
I don't know. Good question. I always said I was just gonna kind of ride this and go wherever I ended up. I've already done things that I never would have thought imaginable, which I'm so extremely like blessed and humbled by. Even just sitting here with you talking on a podcast is so cool to me. I love being able to like help people and offer different perspectives. I was able, like I said, I work with Jen, and I do Zoom groups with her. I've traveled to Chicago, and I did like my own little show there, which I thought was like so insane and so cool. So um, doing more of that, I think, would be awesome. And kind of just taking it wherever it takes me. I kind of have just had that thought process from the beginning. I have a whole nother career, so I don't really rely on the psychic medium stuff for like monetary purpose. I mean, of course, any money is nice, but I think I don't focus on it in that way. So I just kind of ride it wherever it takes me. So I don't know how to answer that exactly. I don't really have an end goal. I just kind of am along for the ride type of thing. So
Thank you. And it's beautiful what you've said, like with mediumship, it's so important to be of service, and money just flows. Money is just energy, and yeah, so that's important.
money always comes and goes, and I think I've tried to adopt that thought process to money is energy. And it's gonna find you, and if you put yourself in the right position. So yeah, just kind of along for the ride.
Any final thoughts or messages that you would like to leave the viewers and listeners with?
No, I mean, thank you for having me on. Of course, it's such a pleasure to talk with you. Halfway around the world you are. I think if there's anything you could take from today, I think it's what I said about like the little moments, and just focusing on being present, having those little moments, whether it be with family, with friends. That's what I've been trying to do in my personal life. So I think it would help everybody to kind of adopt that. But yeah, no, thanks for having me on.
Thank you for coming and speaking with me. And finally, where can people find you, and how can they book their readings with you?
Oh yeah, sure, great. So I won't give my personal number out over the thing, but my email for readings, my email is nickspiritual1, like the number one, at gmail.com. You could reach me there. I'm sure they could also reach out to you. You could always direct them to me.
And I can add it to the description of
Perfect.
the podcast as
Perfect.
well.
And I have I'm on Instagram as well. It's NV Lodat with the number one. That's NV Lodat1 is my Instagram. So you could always message me on there. Usually most people email, so I'm comfortable with that. And yeah, thank you for allowing me to plug everything.
Okay, well, thank you, Nick, and thank you to all of the viewers and listeners. Okay, goodbye.